You are not always eating because you are hungry. Sometimes you are trying to calm an emotion that has nowhere else to go. That is where emotional hunger begins. It does not always arrive dramatically. It may begin after a stressful conversation, a message that left you unsettled, a silence that made your body tense, a moment of loneliness you did not want to admit, or a wave of anxiety that seemed to have no clear reason. You walk into the kitchen almost without thinking. You open something. You take a bite. For a few seconds, the world becomes smaller. The body has something to do. The mouth is occupied. The emotion quiets just enough for you to believe you have found relief. But a little later, the anxiety returns. Sometimes it returns with guilt. Then you are no longer only anxious. You are anxious about having eaten. You begin to judge yourself, promise yourself that tomorrow will be different. Wonder why you have so much discipline in other areas of life, but lose yourself in this one. Yet the question is not whether you have discipline. The deeper question is what part of you is asking food to do the work of comfort, protection, tenderness, silence, and emotional safety. This is not a conversation about diets. It is a conversation about the soul. Before we go deeper, if this message touches something in you, subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore the feminine psyche, anxiety, the shadow, and the journey back to yourself. Now let us look at this with honesty, but without cruelty. When a woman takes her anxiety out on food, she is often not trying to harm herself. She is trying to regulate something that feels too large to hold alone. The body searches for a familiar way to soften the pressure. Food becomes warmth, interruption, reward, distraction, companion, rebellion, comfort, and sometimes the only available language for a need she has not yet learned to name. This is why judgment does not heal emotional hunger. Judgment only deepens the wound. A woman eats to calm herself, then attacks herself for needing comfort. She turns the act into a moral failure, as if the problem were simply weakness. But the psyche is rarely that simple. Behind the impulse, there is often a history, a pattern, a wound, a way the nervous system learned to survive. If we condemn the behavior before we understand its meaning, we remain at the surface, and the unconscious continues to act from underneath. In my work with the psyche, I would not begin by asking, "Why did you eat that?" I would ask, "What happened inside you before you reached for it?" This question changes everything. It moves the attention away from punishment and toward consciousness. It invites you to return to the moment before the automatic movement, the moment where the body felt something it could not metabolize. Perhaps there was fear, perhaps sadness, perhaps a loneliness that felt embarrassing, perhaps anger you did not feel allowed to express, perhaps exhaustion so deep that food became the easiest form of tenderness. Emotional hunger often begins where emotional permission is absent. A woman who was never taught to listen to her feelings may learn to quiet them. She may become very capable in the outer world while remaining uncertain in the inner one. She knows how to work, organize, care for others, respond, adapt, and continue. But when an emotion rises without a clear solution, she may feel helpless. Food offers a kind of immediate structure. It gives the body a task and the mind a temporary escape. The problem is not food itself. Food is not the enemy. Food can be nourishment, pleasure, memory, culture, celebration, family, sensuality, grounding, and care. The problem begins when food becomes the only place where the body is allowed to receive comfort. Then eating no longer belongs only to hunger. It becomes the substitute for crying, resting, speaking, asking, grieving, refusing, or being held. That is emotional hunger. It is not the stomach asking for nourishment. It is the psyche asking for contact. Many women do not realize how often anxiety disguises itself as appetite. The body becomes restless, and the mind interprets that restlessness as a need to eat. Something uncomfortable rises, and the hand reaches for food before consciousness can recognize the emotion. The impulse may feel physical, but beneath it, there is often an emotional charge seeking release. This is why the question, "Am I hungry?" is sometimes too shallow. A better question is, what kind of hunger is this? Physical hunger has a rhythm. It builds gradually. It is patient enough to be nourished. Emotional hunger often feels urgent, specific, almost commanding. It does not simply ask for food. It asks for a certain kind of sensation, a certain intensity, a certain comfort that will change the state of the body quickly. It may appear suddenly after a trigger, and it may disappear briefly once the emotion is numbed. But then, the deeper hunger remains. This is the part we must respect. Because when a woman eats from anxiety, the food is not only food. It becomes an answer to a question the soul has not yet been allowed to ask. It says, I need relief. It says, I need softness. It says, I need someone to notice that I am tired. It says, I am angry, but I do not know where to put my anger. It says, I feel empty, and I do not want to feel the emptiness tonight. The unconscious speaks through symbols, symptoms, impulses, dreams, and repetitions. Emotional eating can become one of its languages. If you only try to control the behavior, the unconscious will often find another door. But if you begin to listen to what the behavior is carrying, the pattern can slowly become conscious. And what becomes conscious no longer rules you in the same way. There is often an old story behind this pattern. Perhaps as a child you were given food when you were upset, but not language for your feelings. Maybe comfort came through sweets, snacks, treats, or the instruction to stop crying and eat something. The body learned that distress should be swallowed, not expressed. Later, when anxiety rises, the adult woman finds herself returning to the same primitive equation. Discomfort plus food equals temporary safety. For another woman, food may have been the only pleasure available in a home filled with tension. It was a private comfort, a small escape, something predictable in an unpredictable emotional climate. The kitchen became a refuge because the people around her were not. In adulthood, she may reach for food whenever life feels emotionally unsafe, not because she lacks intelligence, but because her body remembers where it once found relief. For another, the pattern may be connected to silence. She learned not to speak her needs, not to disturb, not to ask for too much. Food became the place where desire could exist without negotiation. No one had to approve it. No one had to understand it. No one had to hold it. She could take something for herself quickly, secretly, urgently, and for a moment feel that she had received. But what is taken in secrecy rarely becomes true nourishment. It can soothe the surface while leaving the soul unfed. This is why guilt after eating can feel so heavy. It is not only guilt about food, it is grief about another moment in which you did not reach the real need. The deeper self knows that something important was bypassed. You wanted rest and gave yourself stimulation. You wanted tenderness and gave yourself distraction. You wanted to speak and gave yourself silence. You wanted to be held and gave yourself something to swallow. Again, I say this without condemnation. The psyche does what it can with the tools it has, but now, perhaps, you are ready for a new tool. If this reflection is helping you understand your anxiety in a deeper way, like this video now. Let it be a quiet recognition that you are not here to punish yourself. You are here to understand the part of you that has been trying to survive through food. Let us speak about the shadow. The shadow contains the parts of you that were not welcomed, understood, or allowed to live openly. For many women, the shadow is full of appetite. Not only appetite for food, but appetite for rest, touch, recognition, freedom, anger, pleasure, space, truth, and life. A woman may believe she is struggling with food, when in fact she is struggling with all the forbidden hungers that have been pushed into the unconscious. She says she wants to stop eating from anxiety. The soul may be saying that she wants to stop living without permission. This is a delicate distinction. The outer behavior is real, but it is not the whole story. If a woman has spent years being the one who understands everyone, cares for everyone, adjusts to everyone, and keeps functioning while her own needs remain unnamed, then her hunger may become symbolic. The body begins to ask for what the life refuses to give. More sweetness, more fullness, more sensation, more comfort, more possession of something that belongs only to her. Emotional hunger can carry rebellion. A woman may eat at night because the day belonged to everyone else. She may eat in secret because her visible life demands too much control. She may reach for food after being agreeable for hours because something in her wants to stop being good. This does not make her bad. It means the unlived part of her is trying to enter the room. The shadow is never healed by shame. It is healed by relationship. You must learn to ask the impulse what it wants, not with fear, but with curiosity. When the urge appears, instead of immediately becoming the judge, become the listener. There is a difference between saying, "What is wrong with me?" and saying, "What part of me is asking for comfort right now?" The first question produces shame. The second produces consciousness. And consciousness is where freedom begins. Anxiety often lives in the body as unnamed energy. It may come from a conversation you did not finish, anger you swallowed, loneliness you minimized, a decision you are avoiding, a boundary you did not set, or a fear you consider irrational, but that still affects you. If that energy has no language, it seeks discharge through action. Eating becomes action. It gives the body a way to move the anxiety somewhere. But the relief is temporary, because the emotion itself has not been met. This is why emotional hunger can feel repetitive. The same moment returns with different details. You promise not to repeat it, but the pattern appears again because the soul has not yet received what it was asking for. A promise made from shame cannot replace a conversation with the unconscious. The unconscious does not respond well to threats. It responds to attention. When you say, "I will never do this again," but do not listen to the emotional root, the psyche remains alone with the same need. Eventually, the need will return. It may return through food, or through scrolling, shopping, overthinking, controlling, pleasing, arguing, fantasizing, or collapsing. The form may change, but the inner hunger remains. So we must go deeper than control. Control tries to dominate the symptom. Consciousness tries to understand the message. A symptom is not the whole truth, but it is a doorway. Emotional hunger is a doorway into the relationship between your body and your soul. It reveals how you seek comfort, how you avoid pain, how you punish desire, how you carry loneliness, how you respond to emptiness, and how much permission you have given yourself to need. Many women are afraid of their own needs. They are not only afraid of eating too much, they are afraid that if they listen to the deeper hunger, their whole life will have to change. They may discover that they are exhausted in a relationship, unseen in a family, overextended in work, disconnected from the body, deprived of pleasure, resentful from years of being useful, or lonely in a life that appears full. Food becomes easier than truth. Truth asks for change. Food asks only for a moment. This is why emotional eating is often not about lack of awareness. Many women know exactly what they are doing while they are doing it. They may even feel the split inside. One part reaches for comfort, another part watches with judgment. But awareness without compassion becomes another form of punishment. The woman sees the pattern, hates herself for it, and then needs more comfort from the pain of that hatred. The cycle continues. To interrupt it, the inner relationship must change. The part of you that eats from anxiety cannot be treated as an enemy. It is not a monster. It is not a failure. It is a frightened, tired, undernourished part of the psyche, searching for relief in the fastest language it knows. If you approach it with violence, it will hide. If you approach it with presence, it can begin to speak. This is the beginning of healing. Not perfection, not immediate control. A new relationship. There is a reason I speak of relationships so often. The psyche is not a machine to be forced into obedience. It is a living reality that responds to being seen. When you look at your emotional hunger as a message, you begin to restore dignity to the parts of yourself that have been reduced to shame. You start to ask different questions. Not, "How do I stop this?" as the first question, but, "What pain is this pattern protecting me from?" Not, "Why am I so weak?" but, "Where did I learn that comfort had to be hidden?" Not, "How can I punish myself into control?" but, "What form of care would reach the place food has been trying to reach?" These questions bring you closer to the soul. Now, let us consider the feminine body. The feminine body often carries emotions that the conscious mind has dismissed. It receives the tension of relationships, the weight of unspoken words, the fatigue of always being available, the grief of being desired but not deeply met, the exhaustion of performing strength while needing tenderness. If the mind refuses to listen, the body will speak louder. Food can become part of that speech. The impulse to eat may arise not because the body is foolish, but because the body is trying to bring you back to sensation. Anxiety lifts you out of yourself. It pulls you into the future, into imaginary conversations, into fear, into mental noise. Eating brings sensation quickly. Taste, texture, chewing, swallowing, fullness. For a moment, you are no longer floating in thought. You are in the body. This is why the pattern can feel grounding. But grounding through unconsciousness is different from grounding through presence. When you eat without presence, the body is used but not truly met. When you eat with consciousness, even food itself can become part of healing. The goal is not to make food an enemy. The goal is to stop using it as the only bridge back to yourself. A woman who heals emotional hunger does not become less alive. She becomes more alive. She learns to feel before she swallows the feeling. She learns to ask for rest before collapse demands it. She learns to speak anger before resentment becomes appetite. She learns to receive pleasure without secrecy. She learns to nourish the body without asking food to carry the entire burden of her emotional life. This is individuation through the body. Not an abstract path, but a lived one. The journey toward wholeness requires that you reclaim the parts of yourself you have tried to silence. If hunger is symbolic, then you must ask what life within you is hungry for. Perhaps you are hungry for space. Perhaps for a conversation that is honest. Perhaps for affection that does not require performance. Perhaps for beauty, movement, friendship, sensuality, solitude, spiritual meaning, or a kind of rest that no snack can provide. There is no shame in discovering that your hunger is larger than food. There is only information. And information, when held with compassion, becomes guidance. This is where many women begin to soften. They realize the body was not betraying them. It was trying to translate a truth the mind would not allow. The anxiety around food begins to change when the woman stops treating herself as a problem and begins to treat herself as a mystery worth understanding. The mystery is not solved by force. It unfolds through attention. Imagine a woman standing in front of the kitchen late at night. The house is quiet. Everyone else may be asleep, or perhaps she is alone. The day has been long. She carried more than she admitted. She smiled when she felt irritated. She answered messages when she wanted silence. She took care of what needed to be done. She did not collapse because she has learned not to collapse. Then the night arrives. With the noise gone, the inner world rises. The loneliness becomes audible. The sadness has space. The body finally admits exhaustion. But because she has not practiced listening to these states, they feel threatening. She reaches for food, not because she lacks character, but because the food interrupts the encounter with herself. That is the sacred moment. Not after the eating when judgment arrives. Before. The moment when the soul first knocks. If she can learn to pause there, even briefly, a new path opens. The pause is not meant to forbid food. This is important. If the pause becomes another form of control, anxiety will only increase. The pause is meant to bring consciousness into the space where compulsion used to act alone. It allows the adult woman to enter the room before the frightened part takes over. She might still eat, but now she has listened, and listening changes the act. When consciousness enters, the pattern is no longer entirely unconscious. A little space appears. In that space, choice can slowly grow. This is not a small thing. A woman who has used food to soothe anxiety for years may want immediate transformation. She may become impatient with herself, but the psyche does not heal through urgency. Urgency often belongs to the same anxiety that created the pattern. Healing asks for steadiness, repetition, honesty, and tenderness strong enough not to collapse into indulgence or cruelty. There is a middle path. Cruelty says, "You are wrong for needing comfort." Indulgence says, "Do not look at the deeper need." Compassion says, "Let us understand what is happening and then choose with more presence." This middle path is where the self begins to lead. The self is not the part of you that panics, judges, performs, or hides. It is the deeper organizing center of the psyche, the place within you that seeks wholeness. When the self begins to guide your relationship with emotional hunger, the question is no longer only about stopping a behavior. The question becomes how to bring the abandoned parts of your life back into relationship. What emotion has been exiled? What need has been made inconvenient? What truth has been swallowed? What rest has been postponed? What tenderness has been missing? These are not questions to answer as a checklist. They are invitations to listen. Let them move slowly through you. Notice where the body responds. The answer may not arrive in words at first. It may appear as a tightness in the chest, a heaviness in the throat, a sudden sadness, or a memory of being very young and having no one ask what you truly needed. Stay with that. The body tells the truth in its own language. When a woman begins to hear this language, emotional hunger loses some of its mystery. The impulse does not disappear overnight, but it becomes less frightening. She can recognize that the urge is a messenger. She can ask it to slow down. She can give the emotion a name. She can choose food consciously if food is what she truly wants. Or she can offer the soul another form of nourishment. Perhaps the need is rest. Not a snack eaten standing, but rest that has permission. Perhaps the need is grief. Not more distraction, but a few honest tears. Perhaps the need is anger. Not self-punishment, but a boundary. Perhaps the need is connection. Not scrolling and eating, but sending one true message to someone safe. Perhaps the need is beauty. Not escape, but lighting a candle, stepping outside, hearing music, letting the senses be fed without using food as the only doorway. When the soul receives another language, food no longer has to speak for everything. This is freedom. Not the cold freedom of control, but the warm freedom of choice. Now let us speak of guilt. Guilt after emotional eating often feels like punishment, but underneath it, there may be a longing for integrity. Something in you wants to live in greater alignment. That longing is beautiful. The problem begins when guilt becomes shame. Guilt can say, something happened that deserves attention. Shame says, I am the problem. One opens a door, the other locks you in a room. Do not confuse the two. When you feel guilt, listen for the longing beneath it. Perhaps you long to care for your body with more presence. Perhaps you long to stop abandoning your emotions. Perhaps you long to be free from secrecy. Perhaps you long for a life in which comfort is not always followed by self-attack. That longing deserves respect. But shame does not deserve leadership. Shame will tell you to start over tomorrow with violence. It will tell you to compensate, restrict, punish, hide, or make dramatic promises. These promises often fail because they are made from a split psyche. One part becomes the tyrant, another becomes the rebel, and the deeper need remains untouched. The tyrant says, you will never do this again. The rebel eventually says, watch me. The self says, we will listen more deeply next time. That is the voice to cultivate. A woman cannot heal emotional hunger by becoming divided against herself. She heals by gathering herself. The body, the emotion, the appetite, the fear, the need for comfort, the longing for freedom. All of these must come into the same room. Only then can a new relationship form. This is why harsh self-control often fails. It tries to exile the part that wants comfort. But the exiled part grows stronger in the dark. It waits for tiredness, loneliness, stress, and then returns with urgency. Integration works differently. It brings the wanting part into consciousness and asks what it truly needs. The answer is rarely simple at first. Sometimes the part says, I want food. Then you may gently ask, and what would the food give you? The answer may be calm, sweetness, fullness, numbness, rebellion, reward, company, silence, or a break from thinking. Each answer reveals a deeper layer. You do not have to reject the first answer. You only have to keep listening until the soul becomes more visible. There is tenderness in this work. A woman begins to see how long she has been trying to mother herself with whatever was available. If she did not receive emotional attunement, she used sensation. If no one helped her name her feelings, she used food to change them. If the world demanded that she function, she found quick, private comforts in the spaces between responsibilities. This deserves compassion. It also deserves transformation. Compassion without transformation can become stagnation. Transformation without compassion becomes violence. The healing path holds both. It says, I understand why this pattern exists, and I am ready to give myself more than temporary relief. That sentence contains maturity, not the maturity of the persona, which tries to look composed, the maturity of the soul, which tells the truth. Now let us bring this into relationships. Many women eat emotionally after relational triggers. A partner becomes distant. A friend responds coldly. A family member criticizes. Someone says something small that touches a large wound. Instead of expressing the pain or taking space consciously, the woman turns toward food. The body receives what the relationship did not give: immediacy, comfort, sweetness, control. But the relational wound remains. If this happens often, it may mean the real hunger is for emotional safety. You may be starving for a relationship in which your feelings do not need to be defended, where your vulnerability is not used against you, where your needs are not treated as a burden. Food cannot replace that. It can only soften the ache for a moment. The psyche will keep asking for what it needs. If you ignore the need, the symptom returns. So when anxiety sends you toward food after a relational wound, pause and ask, what was touched? Was it abandonment, rejection, invisibility, the old fear of being too much, the humiliation of asking and not receiving? If you can name the wound, you have already begun to separate present hunger from ancient hunger. This does not mean you must confront someone immediately. Sometimes the first repair is inward. You acknowledge that something hurt. You validate the body before searching for comfort outside. You give language to the ache. A named emotion is less likely to possess you than an unnamed one. The unconscious grows stronger in silence. It softens in honest language. This is why journaling can help, not as a performance, but as an encounter. Write the sentence you did not say. Write what the food was supposed to soothe. Write what you needed and did not ask for. Write what you are afraid would happen if you spoke honestly. These writings do not have to be beautiful. They only have to be true. Truth feeds the soul, and a soul that is fed requires less unconscious substitution. Now I want to be very clear. There will be moments when you simply enjoy food, and this must not be turned into pathology. Pleasure is not a sin. Nourishment is not a failure. The feminine body is not meant to live under constant surveillance. A healthy relationship with food includes enjoyment, celebration, and ease. We are not trying to make you afraid of hunger or pleasure. We are trying to restore choice. There is a difference between eating with presence and eating under possession. In presence, you are there. You taste, receive, enjoy, and remain connected to yourself. Under possession, something takes over. The hand moves quickly, the mind becomes foggy, the body is present, but the soul is absent. Afterward, there may be a feeling of waking from a spell. The goal is not to become perfect. The goal is to wake up sooner. At first, you may only wake up afterward. That is still progress. You can look back with compassion and ask what was happening before the impulse. Later, you may wake up during the act. You may slow down, breathe, taste, and notice the emotion underneath. Eventually, you may wake up before the pattern begins and choose from a deeper place. This is how consciousness grows, not all at once, a little earlier each time. There is humility in this work because the body does not transform according to the ego's schedule. You may understand the pattern and still repeat it. Do not use that as proof that you are failing. Repetition often means the unconscious has not yet been fully met. Return again. Listen again. Bring kindness again. Set a boundary again. Rest more honestly again. Speak what is true again. The path is not linear because the psyche is alive. Now let us turn toward the practice. Before I give it to you, think of one woman who carries her anxiety into food and then attacks herself for needing comfort. Send this video to her. She does not need more shame. She needs a new way to listen to herself. For the next 7 days, I want you to practice what I call the 3-name pause. This is not a diet practice. It is a consciousness practice. When you feel the urge to eat from anxiety, pause for a brief moment before acting. You are not forbidding yourself. You are creating a small space where the adult woman can enter. In that pause, name the emotion as honestly as possible. Do not search for a perfect word. If the feeling is anxiety, say anxiety. If it is loneliness, say loneliness. If it is anger, sadness, boredom, exhaustion, fear, or emptiness. Let the name be simple. Then, name the need. The emotion is not the whole story. Beneath it, there is usually a need: rest, comfort, reassurance, expression, a boundary, tenderness, movement, silence, contact, or permission to stop. Let the need appear without immediately judging whether it is convenient. Finally, name one act of care that does not abandon you. This act may still include eating, but if it does, let it become conscious rather than automatic. Sit down, taste, do not hide from yourself. Or perhaps the act is drinking water slowly, stepping outside, placing a hand on the chest, writing the sentence you have not said, taking a shower, lying down for 10 minutes, sending one honest message, or closing the door and allowing yourself to feel what has been postponed. The form is less important than the inner movement. You are teaching the psyche that emotion can be met before it is swallowed. If you still eat after the pause, do not turn the moment into failure. The victory is that consciousness was present. Over time, consciousness changes the relationship. You may notice that the impulse softens, or you may eat with more presence and less shame. You may discover the real need and choose a different form of nourishment. Each possibility is part of the path. At night, write one sentence in a notebook. Today, my emotional hunger was trying to tell me. Then complete it without overthinking. Let the unconscious speak. Some days the answer will be simple. Other days it may surprise you. After a week, you may begin to see patterns. Certain people, certain hours, certain emotions, certain silences. This is not information for punishment. It is information for freedom. The more you understand the pattern, the less possessed you are by it. And when you are less possessed, you can choose. This is where healing becomes real. Not in the fantasy of never feeling anxiety again, but in the capacity to meet anxiety without immediately turning against yourself. Not in the denial of hunger, but in the discernment of what is hungry. Not in the rejection of food, but in the return of food to its rightful place. Nourishment can nourish the body. Comfort can come from many sources. The soul can learn to speak before it has to shout through symptoms. Now write in the comments the city where you are watching from, and tell me if this message made sense to you. Do you take your anxiety out on food? What emotion do you think your emotional hunger has been trying to protect you from? If this reflection spoke to your soul, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Here we continue exploring the feminine psyche, anxiety, the shadow, and the journey back to yourself. You are not weak because you seek comfort. You are not wrong because your body learned a way to survive. But you are being invited into something deeper now. The food was never the whole hunger. The anxiety was never only about appetite. Something in you has been asking to be heard, held, named, and brought back into the light. When you stop attacking the symptom and begin listening to the soul beneath it, emotional hunger becomes more than a struggle. It becomes a doorway. And through that doorway, the woman who once swallowed her anxiety begins to speak to herself with tenderness, truth, and authority. I see you in my next video.